It's building up. I mean, I've seen the statistics where Paris used to be the largest Arab population outside of the Middle East. Dearborn took that over a few years back, but as different demographics continue to grow in California and other places, Dearborn's even going to be threatened with the largest Muslim population outside of the Middle East.
Now, what's wrong with having Muslims living in a city in America, even if they have a domination? I mean, if you go to Brooklyn, you'll see a large population of Hasidic Jews. What's the risk of having Muslims living in a place?
Well, the only risk is what history and statistics show us, that as the population grows, so does the violence, the increased threat upon neighboring societies. It's happened throughout the world. It's happened there, as we've seen in Dearborn. The amount of violence there in the Detroit-Dearborn area grew exponentially as Ford imported Muslims and Arabs into the region.
As workers?
Workers.
But is it just like a minority ghetto, which if it's poor, there's crime for money?
No, I believe it's more crime for principle, for belief, for to support or to protect Islamic values, Islamic beliefs, to force, intimidate others into lining up or being silent if they do not line up against what they believe. We saw that firsthand in Dearborn. We were in Dearborn. We stepped off the plane into police custody, into a courtroom where we were prosecuted for breach of the peace if we were to speak in front of the mosque, the Islamic Center there in Dearborn, Michigan. We had committed no crime. We had not even stepped foot on the property, and yet we were put into a courtroom setting, criminally charged and found guilty illegally of breach of the peace, where we were arrested and detained in jail for a short period of time. We've since then had that overthrown. That has been reversed. The ruling has been reversed, that it was unconstitutional what they did, and we will be setting up a future demonstration the beginning of the year.
But you think they did it just to bust your chops?
I think they did it to protect Islam, to protect Islamic values and teachings. They also did it because of the level of fear. I mean, it was even said in the courtroom, I think, by Chief Haddad. They have no fear of what might happen from the very young Muslims, up to 14 years old, 15 years old, but the range from 15 to 30-year-old male Muslim, they said they have fear of violence, of outbreak or riots if we were allowed to speak there. So the level of fear and intimidation that comes as the population grows, we've seen that here today. We were going to speak out on our beliefs on Islam, our belief on where our Constitution is headed. Our rights are being slowly stripped away, and before we're even allowed to speak, it's been shut down due to threat of violence.
How do you mean our rights are being slowly stripped away? In what sense?
Well, today, because there's a large enough population speaking out against us, giving possible threat. It's like the heckler's veto. You got enough people yelling, and then it's brought an intimidation level to the police force to somehow maintain or keep the peace or to prevent riots from taking place. You are silenced. It's unconstitutional. Instead of what they're doing is they penalize the speaker instead of those that are imposing the violence. So we're being silenced to keep the peace. Instead of using our tax dollar to do what it should be doing, find, apprehend, subdue, arrest, prosecute those groups, those entities that are bringing about these violent reactions.
Do you think there's a bias against conservative activists, whereas if Occupy Wall Street is a liberal movement, that the police will protect their demonstrating, but not so much with conservative demonstrators?
Of course, it's not just here in California or in Dearborn, it's across America. You can see where Christian values are definitely not upheld, where Our own army a few years back burned several hundred Bibles in Afghanistan, and for some reason they had no problem. We burned one Quran, and the entire world freaked out, including our own president that spoke out against us, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense. They all spoke out against us. Instead of saying we are exercising our constitutional rights as American citizens, we have the freedom of speech, freedom of expression. What we do is not under the control of the United States government. Instead of saying this is our constitutional right, we have nothing to do with it, this is not a government action. Instead, they do what they can to try to impose enough pressure, force, threat against us to try to shut us down. Where if we were burning the Book of Mormon, you never would have heard Obama say a word. Secretary Gates would have never called us at our office. These things would have not have happened. Why? Because there's no threat of the Mormon community of a violent outbreak if their book is burned. The Christian community is not going to freak out because their book is burned. Hundreds were burned in Afghanistan. There were not riots all over the world. There was not threat of beheadings. There were not these things going on. It's only in Islamic society that these type of actions are expected. Violence is expected out of the Islamic community. If someone speaks out against Islam, speaks out against the Quran, speaks out against this belief, it is expected that violence or riots could take place.
Now, for those who would believe that your criticism or enmity for Islam is what's evoking these kinds of violent reactions, that they're concerned that you're a hater of their faith, so they're seeing it as potentially racist.
See, those are good words you use. Hate, racist. Those are good labels that the liberal society has begun to throw around. I mean, Islam is not a race, and yet we're racist if we speak out against Islam. If we have a disagreement or we do not line up with Islam or Islamic teaching, then it's hate. Disagreement has become hate, when actually disagreement is one of the pillars of American society, American foundation. And that's why it is the First Amendment that Congress shall not pass a law to restrict our freedom of speech, because disagreement, new ideas, free thinking is the cornerstone of American heritage. If we cannot come out and say this is wrong, we need to be aware, we need to pay attention, then we'll all be led into the gas chamber. We'll all be led to the slaughter. If someone is not saying, hey, look, there's a red flag, we need to pay attention. Well, every time someone stands up and says that, if it's labeled hate, if you're arrested, if you're refused the opportunity to speak, then America's lost.
Isn't there a similarity, though, as a conservative Christian who would like to see prayer in school? A similarity of your crossing that line between church and state, and then criticizing the Muslims for trying to do it too?
Well, see, the thing is that whole rhetoric of separation of church and state was to keep the state out of the church. It was never intended, never written, never implied to keep the church out of our government. That is a lie. That is a falsehood. It needs to be more exposed and pressed to the issue. When you find a few churches, a few pastors with a backbone that will stand up and speak out, you don't see the persecution or the prosecution, rather, against the churches, because it would be unconstitutional for them to do so. To see prayer in school, I have no problem with that. To see Muslims believe what they want to believe, I have no problem with that. But to see...
But whose prayer should we allow in school? And, what if I'm an atheist? Why should the school be the place where we impose religious...
I'm not saying we give school time for prayer, to make it mandatory that you pray to this or you pray to that, but to be restricted that you cannot believe what you believe unless you are bringing some type of restriction or oppression or persecution to another group for what they believe. That is why we're so adamant as we speak out against the threat of Islam and the growth of Islam in America, because with that growth brings oppression, with that growth of Islam brings persecution, brings threats like what we saw to University of California, Irvine here today, the threat of a bomb. if we are there on campus speaking. So, I mean, like I said, those threats are considered valid, and because of only speaking out against Islam.
Okay.
We're not trying to say what people can or cannot believe, or what faith they can believe. We're strong believers in the Constitution that you have freedom of speech, freedom of religion. But freedom of religion should apply for every religion, even the people that would claim they don't have a religion. They're fine to not believe. But don't oppress or try to push down or suppress or silence those that do believe. And that is the main problem we have with Islam. It's not that Islam, they want to do what they want to do. It's that as soon as someone decides they want to speak out for what they believe, just like today, there was a strong movement to silence us, not to disagree with us, not to say they have a difference of opinion than us. The move of Islam is to silence, to bring enough fear, intimidation, a loud enough voice to shout you out, shout you down, that your message is never heard, that you can somehow bring an awakening or an enlightenment to a people or a society.
And did you apply through the conventional channels?
Yes. Back in October, we applied. We talked to university. We filled out the paperwork. They said that they would get back to us. As soon as they recognized who we were and who Dr. Jones was, they told us they would have to do a security assessment in order for us to come onto the campus. We never heard from them again. When we called to check on our application for the request approval for that location at the flagpoles, we were told now that location has been reserved by other groups and we are not available to speak at that location. Plus, they had never gotten back to us with a security assessment.
You feel like you were discriminated against?
Oh, definitely. We not only feel that way, but our legal advisors also advise us that we have been, our civil rights have been violated.
Is there a precedent for this kind of bias at the Irvine campus, to your knowledge?
At the Irvine camp, to my knowledge, no. Like I said, it's widespread. I've seen very many demonstrations and speeches there on YouTube, where there's been several different Muslim
Israel
speakers.
Apartheid Day.
Right, where there's been many violent statements made against America and Israel, and yet those speeches are not suppressed because we disagree with what they say, and we came to voice our disagreement. And our speech was immediately suppressed.
What would you like viewers to do after experiencing what happened to you here today?
Well, I can tell you the only way that anything like this will ever change is to get people out from behind their doors, their houses, their computer screen, and actually to show up at events like this. Even if maybe you don't agree with 100% of the message, to be able to stand up and say, no matter what the message is, it shouldn't be silenced. We in America, we have to preserve that First Amendment, that true freedom of speech, before it is completely stripped away from us. America is the last nation in the world that has true freedom of speech. That is, we're not subject to punishment by imprisonment, fines, because of the quality or the topic of our speech. As of yet, we're not, but we're definitely headed down that road. With examples like the President of the United States, Secretary of Defense calling, warning, even from our own government, that there's a possible threat of terrorist activity if we do what we do, or if we expressed our belief in what we do, then they want to hold us accountable for other people's actions. I mean, that is totally absurd. I believe the senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, said that free speech should be suppressed. I mean, we see it in our congressmen and our elected officials. They're actually working against America, and I believe they should be removed from office immediately.
But Lindsey Graham said free speech should be suppressed?
Certain free speech should not be allowed and should be punishable. That came from Senator Lindsey Graham, South Carolina.
What do you think he was referring to?
He was referring to our actions, speaking out against the Quran, speaking out against Islam.
Was it Quran burning as incitement?
Correct.
That he saw it as too provocative, given...
He saw it as too provocative, and that we're making too many waves in the world, and that that should not be allowed, and should be we should be subject to punishment, to arrest, to prevent us from speaking or exercising our freedom of expression.
How do Christians react to Bibles being burned?
Well, I mean, we see what Christians do when Bibles are burned. Our own government, our own army burned hundreds of Bibles, and there were, I mean, all that happened was several Christian leaders prayed for America and prayed for America to wake up to what is happening, but there was no threats. There were no bomb threats on campuses. Our own government did not even make a speech about this, speak out against this, that this was not the right thing to do. It was actually tried to, if it was not for a lone reporter on site at the incident, we would know nothing about it. But it's the direction our government, our own military, has succumbed to the fear of Islam. We saw General Petraeus speak out against that. I mean, we're over there. We're at war with Islam, whether America wants to realize it and awake to that or not.
You mean that Islam's at war with...
Because Islam is at war with us.
So we're in a defensive war against political Islam.
Right. And as Christians right now, the one thing, the true weapon that we can use is our voice, our speech, to somehow wake up America, or wake up the church, wake up the cowardly pastors that are out there that think that as long as they can keep the tithing plate full, everything will be fine. But that won't last forever, and we're going to wind up having to account for our actions or our inactions one day.
You think they're acting in God's way, in defending their own pulpits rather than their faith?
Well, if you defend your pulpit, not your faith, I don't think God's too happy with that. You know, you can't be a true believer if you don't truly believe. So I mean, if you've built your church and you're defending what you've built, then that's not of God. If you follow God, then God's always going to require you to take a risk and to step out and to do the things that actually you can't do. You're going to have to believe that God's going to have to open up a door, provide a way, provide a miracle, provide a path. God's going to have to provide. When we stop believing and trusting in God, then we've given up already, and we're lost.
And is this, in your opinion, a holy war that Christians have to defend, like the holy wars of history?
This has been a holy war, and it's been going on for quite a long time. That has not started a few days ago. This has been going on for hundreds of years.
How do you mean? You mean just the war against Israel, or?
The war, the growing threat of Islam against Israel, against America. I mean, Islam's already been pushed back one time. That was the beginning of the Crusades, and then it got perverted by men that got drunken with power. It was not the Christian thing to do. It's not biblical. You cannot find a teaching on that. What Islam does and what it continues to do, you can find support for that throughout the Quran. What happened in the Crusades and what was forced upon men and women, you find no teaching to support that. So I mean, there's been a lot of Christian movements that have not been the right direction, but it's also not God's will. I believe what God is calling us to do, what God did in the New Testament, He sent His men to speak to the church, to encourage the church, to challenge the church, to rebuke the church, that if you do not step up, you do not stand up, you do not correct, you do not repent and turn, you will be lost. And I believe that is a message that the American church desperately has to grab hold of.
How do you feel about the Palestinian independence movement?
I think it's an attack against Israel. It's a direct attack against Israel.
Do you think it's a branch of the global jihad?
Yes. Yes, I mean we see every day, every movement, even by the actions of Hussein Obama, that his support for the Muslim Brotherhood, his support for Islam, his support for Islamic states against Israel has grown every day he's been in office.
You think he's supporting a gathering storm of radical Islamism around Israel?
Well, as Mubarak was overturned in Egypt, was it not Obama that gave $1 billion toward Egypt, toward the Muslim Brotherhood? Was it not Hillary Clinton that spoke out in favor of the Muslim Brotherhood at one point? I mean, our administration is calling indirectly for the death of Israel and the death of America themselves.
How is the administration calling for the death of Israel, you think?
Because of their actions. Well, what a person says should be backed up by what they do. What our administration says and then what they do are two different things. When they financially support the overthrow of Israel or the downfall of America, I believe their actions speak louder than their words. The Bible tells you that the truth shall be known by its fruit. When you look at the fruit of the Obama administration, when you look at the fruit of what he has accomplished in the last 3 years, it is devastating to America. And we must do whatever we can to have him removed from office, if not by impeachment, then by election.
Do you feel that the administration is mollifying America, mollifying us against criticizing or even defending ourselves against an encroaching Sharia movement?
Well, I mean, there's been several court cases around America where Sharia has been implemented.
Well, Sharia in enforcing Islamic code in contracts between Muslims. What's the risk in that? You know, if they want to judge something,
Congress shall make no law.
Well, it's not Congress though.
Yeah. Okay. Congress is our highest court. It is our highest law. It is our constitutional rights.
Right.
If that is the highest law, it doesn't matter what court falls underneath that. It is still under that same precedent. It shall make no law that would supersede your freedom of speech, your freedom of religion, your freedom to exercise expression. These freedoms are inherited and they're guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States. No city court, no district court, no U.S. Supreme Court can supersede what the Constitution of the United States says, and yet they're doing it daily around America.
I'm wondering if maybe you could stand together just for. Can we get a picture together?
Yeah, sure. And then wanted to get a copy of those papers the police gave us. Not to get a copy of them, but get the papers and let him get that sector off there or whatever it was.
Section. Yep.
Okay. Do we have to, every time he comes to the picture, they have to raise the tripod? Let me, if you maybe just stand back a little bit, because I don't want to get it'll be a little bit sunny.